GM friends, Drew Roberts reporting live from the swamp. Wanted to discuss a project I've been working on for a client, kind of a group of people for a number of years, and it's a private equity group that's tokenized. So it's a DAO structure with voting rights and structured as a deployer for its brand. So instead of acquiring companies, it's more launching out startups. So I guess has a little bit more of a Y Combinator feel through the application process, all tailored around Web3, cryptocurrency, and of course, that combination with artificial intelligence. So wanted to pop on this video to kind of set the stage and the overall discussion here as far as a traditional private equity group, and then we'll hop into what makes what I'm doing with this client, what makes it different, and take it from there. So I'm gonna bring this up on stage. I like to throw my blue light glasses while I do this. So let me pop that on and hit play. I guess it would help if you could hear it. So give me a second. Let me pull it up, and we'll get into it. I mean, maybe I could just say what it is. So you've got a pool of cash. It's similar to like a hedge fund, venture capitalist. You've got investment going towards. I can't keep up with what he's saying. So let me pause it and figure out how we can get the volume going. Let's see. It should be running in through the voice chat. I'm not outputting the voice chat. That's what it is. Let me see. We're having technical difficulties here in the swamp. I appreciate you tuning in while I mess with something that should have been done ahead of time, I guess. So it's running it to their. Trying to see the chat. It should be running it. The chat's not outputting, so the system on the Go XLR. Let me try that. Input is. All right, let's try this. All right, we're gonna try this again here in just a second. I know it works on that computer, so let me go hop that on. I'll be right back. All right, testing 1, 2, 3. We'll see if this one works. Let me pop it this way and pull this up. It looks like my audio is working. So present on this screen. Browser, YouTube.
Today, I'm going to break down exactly how.
All right, present.
Private equity funds are structured, how the GP-LP model works, how carry flows, how management fees are earned, and how fund managers actually get paid. If you've ever heard of the term private equity and wondered how these massive firms structure their funds, how they buy companies, or how money moves behind the scenes, this video is going to make it all crystal clear. Think of this as a guided walkthrough. We're going to use a simple $50 million private equity fund as our example to make all the pieces click together. So what exactly is a private equity fund? So down to the iPad here, a private equity fund is essentially a pool of capital raised from investors over here that put money into this pool for the purpose of buying private companies or equity in privately held businesses. And typically they're improving these businesses, doing good things, growing the businesses, and hoping to sell for a big profit that they can return back to the pool of money and split those returns between their investors and themselves, the fund managers over here. This is very similar to how hedge funds run, venture capital, real estate fund, private credit funds. They're all a pool of money that invest into a certain thing that then when that thing returns money, they just split the returns between the investors and the fund managers. Now, the closest sister to private equity would be venture capital. Venture capital also seeks to invest into businesses and grow them and do good things with them. Unlike venture capital, which usually invests into early stage startups, private equity invests into businesses that have more structure behind them. They already have things like cash flow, established operations, real customers, and a proven business model. Where venture capital, on the other hand, is investing usually into an idea and a very early stage team. And funny enough, most venture capital firms eventually hope to sell their portfolio funds to larger private equity firms, or eventually sell them onto the public markets as an IPO, where maybe hedge funds will come and buy those things. But again, in the world of funds, these are all essentially just a pool of money looking to drive returns for investors. But again, today's topic is on private equity, and private equity is in the business of acquiring established companies, improving them, and selling them to generate profit. Now, most private equity funds are built on this exact same basic framework, the GP-LP structure. Instead of calling it a pool of capital, they call it a limited partnership, as you can see on my screen here. And you see my little pool here, that stands for our pool of capital. Instead of having investors, they have limited partners here, LPs, that invest into the limited partnership, the pool of capital. Instead of having just fund managers, these fund managers are called the general partner and the management company over here. These help make the investment decisions of what's happening in the limited partnership that ultimately goes and buys these companies to generate a profit and produce a return back to the limited partnership that then is split between the limited partners and the general partner. To break this down even simpler, LPs, limited partners, contribute the capital, and the GP, general partner, controls the fund and decides what investments to make. This is how the largest funds in the world run. And all of this is governed by two documents, your LPA and PPM, that I lovingly call the Bible, because it is the bylaws and covenants and laws of your fund. This structure has been used for decades because it cleanly separates investor capital from fund manager control and it allows the manager to operate efficiently without interference. All right, let's come back to our $50 million private equity fund example. So here's the structure. Investors commit $50 million to the limited partnership, and they sign an LPA and a PPM that defines how they're going to get paid back. And for this example, we're going to use a pretty common structure, which is a 2% management fee and an 80-20 split on profits. We'll come back to this in a minute. You as the fund manager come over and set up your general partner, your GP, and that will be where your investment committee is to make and help decision making. And then also you set up your management company. Your management co is where your salary, staff, overhead, and operations all live right here. And this is what collects the 2% management fee per year. The 20% carry goes to the general partner here. Typically though, these are owned by the same individuals. This is you and your team will also be on the GP and the management company. So this is how money flows in the fund. LPs commit the capital to the limited partnership. The limited partnership, by direction of the general partner and management company, goes and makes investments. In this case, it's buying businesses. Sometimes they'll set up like an SPV blocker entity just to do that, but they go and buy these businesses. They invest, they hire staff, and they buy a bunch of these great businesses. When the investments make money, the money flows back to the limited partnership and then is split between the LPs and the general partner. Now, let's talk about how that split works, which is usually called a waterfall distribution, how the GP, the management company, and the limited partners all get paid. Now, as a note, with a $50 million private equity fund, you probably don't need all $50 million day one. You're going to call this capital down in tranches of maybe 5 or 10 million as you need it to buy these investments. Furthermore, these funds can use leverage. Oftentimes, if you raised $50 million, you could probably borrow from a bank an additional $75 million of debt financing for a total purchasing power of $125 million to then go and make these investments. Now, let's talk about how the GP and management company get paid in two parts. Part one is the management fee. Now, private equity funds usually charge a management fee of around 2% per year, and that's usually taken at 0.5% per quarter. Now, some funds do an acquisition fee or disposition fee, but for today, we're just going to talk about a 2% management fee. So on a $50 million fund, 2% of 50 million would be $1 million per year, pending the whole fund is called down. Now, it's a good note. Most funds, if you only call half this capital, you use 25 million of the 50, you're usually only taking management fees on the money that you are using. But for this example, let's assume that you've just called down all 50 million. And so you're making 1 million a year in management fees that are paid over to your management co here to help keep staff, lights on, office space, etc., all in the management company. Now, part two of getting paid comes to the GP. This is what's called carried interest or carry. Carry or carried interest is the profit share the GP earns for growing the investor's money. This can be structured in a lot of different ways, but the standard structure is 80% to the limited partners and 20% to the general partner. Something to remember though, this is not a salary. This is not guaranteed. This is a reward for making profitable deals as the GP. This is your carrot. This is why people go to business school and work on Wall Street and try to make all these things so that one day they can be on the GP and earn some carried interest. So I'm going to jump over to my Excel spreadsheet here and show you some math to break down how this would work in this example of a $50 million fund. So you can see here, we have private equity breakdown. Let's say we've raised 50 million of equity and we borrowed 75 million of debt, which gives us a total purchasing power of $125 million. Now, we believe we're going to double the size of this portfolio. We're going to do a 2x over 3 years, which is pretty good. So over the next 3 years, we believe we can double this company or group of companies from 125 to 250 million. So let's go down further of how this math would break out. Okay, let's say we're borrowing that debt of 75 million at a 6.5% interest rate per year. So our debt service per year would be $4.875 million. And if you total that up over 3 years, that's $14.6 million. Now, I know I'm going fast here. You can go back and rewatch this, but we'll just go fast for everybody here. So let's say our plan works and we crushed it perfectly, which by the way, never happens, but for the Excel model's sake, we crushed it, all right? In 3 years, we doubled our money. We took our portfolio from 125 to $250 million. You can see my math there. Now let's pay everything back and see how the splits work. So total debt payback, you can see my math here. Over 3 years, I'm paying back my 14 million plus my 75 million for a total payback of 89 million. During that period, we charged $3 million of management fees, assuming all 50 million was called and we charged 2% per year. That would be $50 million, okay? For a subtotal of 157 million. You can see here, I took 250 minus 89 minus 3 brings us to 157. All right, that's how much we made as profit, which is pretty darn good. Well done, you guys. Well done. Again, it never works like this as perfect as this, but it's working perfect right now in the Excel spreadsheet. All right. So first thing we got to do is equity payback to investors. Most private equity funds make you pay back all equity first to investors. Great. So investors gave us 50 million. Let's pay that back first. So 50 million is paid back first, leaving us with $107 million of gains. Not too bad. Now we do our split. So on 107, we're going to split 80-20. You can see the math here. We're taking this number times 0.8 and this number times 0.2. Now, if I total up how much the LPs are getting paid back, it's the equity payback plus 85 million for a total of $135 million. And us, the general partner, are making $21 million. Not too bad for 3 years. Plus, we're making $3 million from the management fees. Now, that might have paid for staff and other things, but in total, we're making just under $25 million on this deal. Pretty cool. Our investors in 3 years did a 2.7x on their money, or a multiple on invested capital. That's what that means there, MOIC, with a simple IRR, or rate of return, of 91% per year. That's essentially just this number annualized per year. So well done. You guys crushed it. This is why people want to run funds. You can make this kind of money, $21 million on a $50 million fund, which is a relatively small fund. By the way, the numbers like this scale. If you added a zero and you were a $500 million fund, the numbers work out pretty darn similar. There isn't a ton of growth things you have to do as a team to manage a 50 million versus a 500 million versus a $5 billion fund. Yes, staff goes up a little bit, compliance costs go up, yes, but it's not that drastic. This is why I believe running investment funds is the best business model on earth. Oh, and by the way, is the number one category of billionaires is private equity and investment fund management. This little thing, because you can see how much money you can make in just a few years, even running a relatively small fund. Now, let's take a little bit deeper look at how the deal flow takes place inside of a private equity fund. On our example here, we doubled this company in a matter of 3 years. And this is where private equity managers make their big money, is by doing something like that. So here's the simple cycle. Number one, they raise capital from LPs, just like we described. Number two, they find great companies that fit their investment thesis and they can add a ton of value to. Number three, they buy the company using the fund's capital. Hopefully they get a good deal on it. Number four, they improve the company. They use some of the leftover capital to inject into the company to get operational upgrades, cost efficiencies, leadership changes, expansion, debt restructuring, you name it. They improve the business like crazy. A lot of great private equity people are great operators as well. They can come into a business and tweak a number of great things to grow it immensely. That's why they make the big bucks. And then finally, they sell the company for much more than they bought it and return capital and profits to investors and take some of the carry, the 20% like we talked about, for themselves. To break this cycle down even more, this is private equity in one sentence. They buy companies, they make them better, sell them, and then split the returns and gains. This structure of funds with private equity works so well for three main reasons. Number one, great alignment of interests. LPs get 80% of profits and GPs only get paid on the 20% when investors win and return their capital first. Number two is control. GPs control the fund, the deals, the strategy without interference. Limited partners are limited on their control. They're also limited on their exposure. This allows GPs to operate with autonomy within their investment thesis and strategy. And finally, number three is scalability once you prove performance. If you can do what I just described well on fund one, there's a good chance you're raising a much bigger fund two, and a fund three, and a fund four. Again, this is the number one category of billionaires on the Forbes 100 list because they proved this model again and again, and more people wanted to give them money to keep doing this over and over again. This is one of the cleanest, most powerful models in all of finance, and now you know how one operates. So if you like this video, please comment down below.
All right, GM friends. So to kind of hop into what this client is thinking and what we're trying to do with this, it's going to be a similar model, but instead of doing the acquisition, it'll have some first. It needs to launch out the services. So essentially, building a application process, a CRM, to kind of like the marketing of with bag workers, clipping services, just kind of in general, influencer, KOLs, whatever you want to call that, that medium, and then adding more software. So initially, it's building out all the software functionality, especially as it pertains to gamification. And I can show you the code base, what's been built so far. And then kind of the list of items. It's in there in the documents folder in that code repository. What still needs to be added? So I'm going to pull that up here in just a second. But I think first, just what I wanted to hit on was that kind of core organizational model and like that architecture of the group. There's an overarching DAO for the whole thing. It's the parent kind of private equity group layer, and it's a decentralized group. It's also a token deployer for each of the features, each of the sub brands. Even if it gets to the place where there are acquisitions of businesses, that process and that overall structure would also be tokenized. And the subsidiary brands, the focus is on that flywheel model, which is Jim Collins inspired, that Amazon used in that Good to Great, and he wrote a separate book called Flywheel. And it's, for example, building out AWS because as an online bookstore, they needed hosting, and then getting an extra revenue stream for that. I mean, I'm sure all of y'all are familiar with the Flywheel model. If not, plug that into your AI. But essentially, each subsidiary brand within this tokenized private equity group, this DAO, is launched to solve initially an internal operational need or service gap. And then it becomes a standalone product and service for the broader market, bringing in that revenue stream to the overall DAO structure. And the operational goal is hyper automation and decentralization. So there heavily integration of AI and really just kind of decision tree processes, microservices that are needed to perform that service. Looks like my volume's a little low. There's let me pull this up. When the acquisitions are going, or even like with these services, sorry, my dog's laying on my feet. There is a transition for real world businesses into this DAO structure. And to do that, you have to delegate the service fulfillment to overseas contractors. They can be in the U.S., but your W-8 payments would be the entirety of the workforce, even if they're coming back into the U.S. For work to be done. When it's done through cryptocurrency payment rails, everything in my viewpoint's a W-8 overseas contractor, and then you can automate service management layers with AI. There's also the ability to minimize traditional corporate and bureaucratic friction by operating natively on chain. And then as far as the tech stack infrastructure, there's going to be one back-end system. It's a multi-tenant architecture with a shared ledger, allowing seamless interoperability and permission management across the main group and all subsidiary brands. So all the logic would be on the server side on the back end, and then that API, whether it's JSON data or ideally HTMX fragment, HTML and CSS fragments going out through those endpoints. They'll have a number of different front end branded websites, and even each user can have their own as well with it. The rest of it we can kind of get into between the tokens and the non-fungible tokens, with the funding rounds and how all that will work together. There's vesting with it. With, if you recall, my ERC 420 standard that I spoke at that conference down in Miami a couple years ago. I've deployed a number of times that can stake, or not really stake. It vests, kind of like a your traditional finance model for a cliff, and then a monthly or whatever terms you put in that smart contract withdrawal for each of those non-fungible tokens to be able, the owner of those tokens can withdraw at that time. And there's also ways to automate that. So they just receive the airdrops for having the non-fungible tokens, the NFTs. There's membership, access, and kind of clearance dynamics. As far as the backend protocol goes, you have to have the application process to have the higher up. You have to have essentially an ownership stake on the back end. It's all a shared custodial system. So it would actually create separate wallets for you. And you can see that in the code base. It creates separate wallets, just like typical deployers do these days. And unfortunately, typical wallets do as well, where you can export your key, but the service also has it. So for self-custodial, you have to transfer it out to your self-custodial wallet. And anything that, when you get up to a sizable amount, you'll want to transfer those out. I was trying to look at anything else that's worth mentioning in this kind of quick video. I think that's pretty much it. The rest of it we're still being built out as far as like the back end protocol goes, and the whole system. It uses Forge, so it's primarily EVM based. It does create a wallet for Solana and Hedera. Those are the only ones we've integrated so far. There may be options, but most of it's going to be EVM, and it looks like kind of the reason it was on the back burner since the end of the year last year. And then the reason why they wanted me to hop back into this code base recently is the launch of Robinhood. Seems like it's a good fit for the NFTs will be on mainnet, but for the actual token structure, Robinhood for this type of business model seems like an even better fit than Base and some of the other options that we're looking at. I do wish Robinhood was an OP stack with the super chain ERC20 token standards, but the problem with those is the token scanners. They have a very difficult time, even though it's the same contract address across every chain within the Ethereum virtual machine. So like you have the same contract address on Base and on Uni and on Unichain and on mainnet. And if you want to do Optimism or any of the other OP stacks, it'd all be the same contract address, and you just do that through the salt and the deployment. But the problem with that is the scanners have a very difficult time of looking at the total market cap. The price of the token would remain the same across all of them, but it has some red flags in the scanners, because in order to wrap it up onto a layer 2 or go back to layer 1, it's essentially or go from one layer 2 to another layer 2. That contract for the super chain ERC20 has a mint and has a burn to go out, and then a mint to come back in on that. So the mint and burn functions right now are still throwing red flags on the scanners. So it does seem like it's best just to pick one chain if you're going to do that. Kind of a fresh blockchain that's more geared towards this TradFi world, like Robinhood, I think is a good fit for what this client's trying to do. So, yeah, if you have any questions or anything else you want to get into, shoot me. I'll do some more of these. I bought the subscription for StreamYard. I had a buddy working on some that I can plug in from OBS and hit out through all the same thing. StreamYard is still the easiest for bringing people on. Of course, this one I didn't have anybody join, but you kind of get the point. So appreciate y'all tuning in, and I'll see you on the other side of the swamp by Yuga Labs. I don't know if I want to play my Georgia kid, Tom. Yeah, might as well. I like Tom. This is a 12-year-old from Georgia, and when Bitcoin was $8, this is his video. I guess about 15 years ago, 14 years ago. So enjoy. Thank you, Tom.
This is a Bitcoin. It is pretty much, it's a peer-to-peer virtual currency. Let me see if I can pull that up right here. So, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin says just that it is a peer-to-peer. Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer currency. Peer-to-peer means that no central authority issues new money or tracks transactions. These tasks are managed collectively by the network. So, yep, that's what their website says. But pretty much, you can trade your real money, like real money, for Bitcoins, which are files stored on your computer, or flash drive device, any sort of device, and they can be used as money on certain websites, etc. In fact, I have a list of the websites that accept it right here, and there's a couple of different ones, such as, there's one that actually, some of them were created for Bitcoin, such as Bitcoin Gadgets, which is a site that has electronic gadgets with international shipping at bitcoingadgets.com. See, there's a whole bunch of these. Well, let's see, for gift cards, you can buy gift cards with Bitcoin, Bitcoins at bitcoincodes.com, which sells Xbox Live, PSN, and Game Time codes. But now may not be the best time to buy PlayStation Network gift cards. Just letting you know. If you're watching this from the future, then a couple days ago, the PlayStation Network was hacked, and a bunch of credit card numbers were reportedly stolen. But anyway, also there's stuff like professional services like Bitcoin consultancy. There's a whole bunch of different things. You can find that list at, if you go to bitcoin.org and then click on sites that accept Bitcoin, it'll give you the whole list. Also, I have the trading site up, or the share site, Bitcoin charts, and it looks like right now 1 Bitcoin is equal to about $8 US, which is and also about 7.5 GBPs, 11.5 Brazilian dollar, or Brazilian. What's the Brazilian currency? Sorry. The Brazilian reals. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm not really good with the South America currencies. Anyway, so that's all pretty neat. But they're referred to, if you see BTC anywhere, that will generally be referring to Bitcoins. For example, 100 BTC. But a Bitcoin, like I said earlier, it's a file, or it's a binary number associated with a Bitcoin address, which is stored in a file on a flash drive, device, computer, whatever. So, and it says, I'm reading this site and I'm paraphrasing, but how are new bitcoins generated? They're generated by a network node each time that it finds the solution to a certain mathematical problem, which is difficult to perform and can demonstrate a proof of work. And the reward for solving a certain problem is being automatically adjusted so that in the first 4 years, 10,500,000 bitcoins will be created. And then the amount is halved each 4 years, so the next 4 years there will be 5,250,000, etc. And then, let's see, currently there is, let me see, sorry, this information, okay, wow, there's 6,220,800 bitcoins currently in existence, and it says that around year 2140, the total number of coins will remain static at 20,999,999.9769 bitcoins. That's a lot of bitcoins. So that's a lot about it. And then also, lots of people are wondering how can they get their own bitcoins to make purchases on these sites, or just to invest in them in case bitcoins become like an international currency. If you go to let's see, Mt. Gox, which is at mtgox.com. Then, let's see, or you can go to just the bitcoin.org and you can find it from there. But if you go to Mt. Gox, you'll get a page saying Mt. Gox 24/7 Bitcoin exchange, and then there's a little sign up / login button, and it says what bitcoins are. There's a buy bitcoins button, sell bitcoins, and advanced trading. And then it pretty much tries to convince you to make an account here by saying 4 easy steps. 1. Make an account. 2. Add some funds. 3. Buy or sell bitcoins. 4. Withdraw your converted funds. Sign up today. So, yeah. And then it has a graph on the homepage showing the price over the last 48 hours, which is useful to show whether you really want, this is something that you might want to invest in. Right now it appears that it's going up at this point, so right now it would probably be a pretty good investment. But that's bitcoins for you. There are a bunch of sites that accept them, and I cannot list all of them here because there are many, like, as in, it's a wiki page, sort of like Wikipedia, and it fills up a really good sized page. Let's see, gosh, can't even count them. There's a whole bunch of them. So, go out, you can check it out at bitcoin.org, just check it out. It's really neat, a really neat idea. Though I have to say that I don't think it'll be around for a very long time. I'm pretty confident that the if not the U.S. government, then some government will shut it down. Because this is not something that a government would want. People exchanging their currency for this virtual currency. So, or there's actually some people are thinking that these bitcoins may just be a hoax, And once you get the Bitcoins, now most people are able to use them, but they're thinking that once a certain number of Bitcoins are purchased, then all the sites that accept Bitcoins will begin to reject them. So the person who whoever originally distributed the Bitcoins would have made a lot of money, and everybody else would be left with useless files. So you can try to invest in it. It may be one of the best investments you'll ever make, or it may be one of the worst. I'll leave that for you to decide. Tune in next time. Also find us doing some work at Garticles, which is at sasogeek.com. sasogeek.com. Tune in next time. Take you later.